Punching is really my bread and butter. It's really what I made my bones on with the YouTube channel. You guys, a lot of you have seen the original D&M custom bait stuff that I did, punching mats on Okeechobee, and really it's one of the techniques I love the most. There's nothing like pitching into a big mat and freaking lighting the braid up and making it scream. And this time of year, you know, the pre-spawn, the spawn, even staging fish, that punching bite really comes into play because fish tend to use that heavy cover as a point before reaching the beds, and that's why we target it so much on these natural lakes down in Florida, especially South Florida. It seems to really play such a huge role in that what we call spring but most people call winter, which runs from anywhere in like October, November, all the way through. I mean, I've caught them in the mats as late as April. It all depends on really how cold of a winter we get and how those waves of fish move up to bed. If they get stuck, they get stuck in that heavy cover and we end up punching. Yet if we get late waves of spawners in like May, even sometimes June, you know, we'll be pitching cane heads, round reed heads to target those fish that you can't see bedding, but you know they're down there at the base of those roots. So like I said, this is a brush up. So what we're gonna do a couple things. First, we're gonna run through the basic setups that you need to punch just about anything and a few tweaks that you might make in those setups. And then we're gonna run through some baits and then we're gonna talk a little bit about cover. So let's get started. So first off, setups. Well, whenever I go out and I know that punching is in play, I have 3 rods rigged up, and that's these 3 right here. And basically what they incorporate is, most of it's for mat fishing because I love mat fishing, and if I can find a mat bite, that's what I'm gonna do. But I also do have a setup, and it's basically for pitching round reeds, pitching cane, pitching like emergent vegetation, even pads, but it's more open vegetation. It's not canopied like a mat would be. So let's talk that setup for that emergent vegetation, that cane and that round reeds. You know, you're gonna focus on round reed clumps, cane clumps, pad clumps. And what I like, there's 2 different things. What I've rigged up right here, this is a double punch skirt rig. Credit to Joe Holland, FLW angler. He figured this joker out. And a 1 ounce weight, you can vary between the 1 ounce and a 3/4 ounce. I got my bullet stoppers right there, so that tungsten stays right where it should be. I'll use either an offset shank hook if I'm in, say, freaking like cane, pads, things that you can get hung up on real easy. If I'm in a little bit of sparser stuff where I really tweaked on getting a good hook set and I'm worried about it, I will snell a straight shank hook. But the key here is you're focusing on emergent cover, cane, round reeds, pads. Right here, basically it's a double KO punch skirt. I like the quick change because they come off real easy and you can add them. You can go down to 1 skirt, you can go down just to a straight punching rig. The other thing that I'll use is a jig in this situation. Once again, either a 3/4 or 1 ounce jig, a double weed guard jig. But trailer wise, you know, this is a little bit tweaky. I got a fat ace on here. My buddy up on Kissimmee, Wesley Wise, taught me about this. But I'll use things like a Gambler Mega Daddy, a big kind of like flappy craw. I'll use burner craw if I want more kick. It really, you have to judge the mood of the fish depending on what your trailer is, how big it is, how small it is. Sometimes we'll go down as small as a BB cricket. Really depends on the mood of the fish. But when this is going to come into play is twofold. One, if you have open like emergent vegetation like we talked about, and fish are using those areas to stage to come into spawn. And the other thing is sometimes we get fish spawning on basically the bases of those, the crowns as I like to call them, the pad crown, the round reed crown, that down deep base stem where you can't really see them, but you know they're there, and basically they're spawning on that. So that extra flare of the jig skirt really, or the, I guess in this case a punch skirt, really triggers those fish to bite because you can kind of lift and yo-yo the bait and you're really not moving it too much. It's just like bed fishing but a little bit heavier weight, and you're basically pissing the fish off. I mean, and that's what that double punch skirt does. That's what those star flash skirts do that you'll find on the double weed guard jig. It's really an agitation without having to move the bait too much, and that's when it really comes into play, when you have those spawners that you can't see. But 1 ounce or 3/4 ounce, put a punch skirt on it, toss a jig, Mega Daddy, burner crawl, even down to a BB cricket if they're real moody. But that's my Emergent cover punching setup. Get it out and start pitching in. All right, so let's talk about mats, because that's my favorite. And if I can find that bite, I will fish it day in and day out, but you can't always find it. So I got 2 setups for that. And basically these 2 setups incorporate different weight sizes, because especially with the winds, with the hurricane we just had, you run into different thickness of cover. And cover can vary in a wide range, which we'll talk about in a sec, but let's hit these setups real quick. I have right here, this is a 2 ounce Rains and a Why Not straight shank hook. It's a 4/0 hack attack. That's for my super heavy cover. I will go up to a 2 1/4 or a 2 1/2 if it's super heavy, but in general, the 2 will get me through. One note about this: if you can avoid using a 2, avoid it, because what ends up happening with this 2 ounce is that weight, when you actually hook the fish, it sort of bounces on the fish's mouth and on the hook, and it can pop the hook out. But really, when it comes down to it, if you're fishing that heavy a cover, you need the 2 to get through, and you just got to accept the fact that you're going to lose some fish when you're doing it. The other setup, and this is the traditional 100% across the board, a lot of people use it, but there's a reason for that, and that's just a 1 1/2 ounce tungsten weight. This is a Rains with a straight shank. It's a 4/0 Strike King hack attack. Once again, we're using the bobber stoppers. I think these are 6 cents, but this will get you through, I'd say, 75 to 80% of the matted cover you're going to run into. And they bite it. You don't have the, that hook getting popped out like you do with the 2 ounce. It's just a solid setup, and it really, like I said, day in and day out, this 1 1/2 is going to play. But I like having that 2 ready to go, because you do run into some situations where you don't want to retie. You get one isolated mat, it's super duper thick because the wind blew in on it super hard, and you need that 2. You pick it up, plunk plunk, you know if they're there or not, and you can light that braid up maybe. One thing across all these punching setups, I'm running 65-pound Power Pro slick. Now, I've experimented with 80. I like 80 if you know you're on super big fish, you're in mats that have real thick cane around them, or they're made of real thick cane, or you're pitching Emergent open cane kind of clumps or heads, and you need that super thick braid to cut through the grass. Otherwise, 65-pound will do the job. And I like the slick. It does fray up a little quicker, but it is quite a bit quieter than your standard Power Pro. And frankly, it comes in this brown color, and I'm not one to marker up the line, but that brown looks a lot more like the tannic water and sort of the dead grass we have around down here. So I think it's a little more natural personally. And like I said, that sound trick with the slick, it's going to be a little bit quieter. So let's run through baits real quick, and then we're going to talk about what kind of cover to focus on. So let's pull out the favorite. This, day in and day out, BB cricket is going to be absolutely killer. This is friendly fire, but back at you, black and blues, darker colors, especially if you got fish that are in a tweaky mood that just aren't behaving. You can't beat this. You get a compact presentation with no matter what weight you're throwing, you get through. And let me tell you, when the water temps are down, the big fish do bite it. So BB cricket, if you got one choice to go with, BB cricket's gonna be your deal. Let's look at what else we got in here. Burner craw. When to use a burner craw? Well, I talked about when you're pitching into that emergent vegetation and you want a little more movement. Say it's a little later in spring, the water's a little warmer, things are a little more stable. These kicker legs will move a little bit, especially when you're pumping up and down. Or if you got more active fish under the mats and you're pumping that bait up and down at a certain cadence, these kicker legs are gonna move, they're gonna kick water, and they're gonna create that sort of trigger that really closes the deal on a bite. But burner craw is solid. I'll use it more for the emergent and when I have active fish in those mats, just because of those kicker legs. But back at you, solid color, burner craw, definitely a go-to. What else we got here? Yeah, I think you're gonna start seeing what color I like, because why not? Back at you. When do I use a why not? Why not is mostly for mat punching. Why I like it. Once again, earlier season, we're gonna be pitching mats, punching mats, because the water's usually a bit cooler. The why not is another kind of do nothing style bait. It's got this kind of nice paddle on here that you can pull apart just like that. And it doesn't kick too much. It definitely will move. There's those ridges on there, which are gonna gently vibrate as it melts through the mat. The other thing, and this is with the burner craw as well, they have this sort of thicker body, which make them great in the mats because it stops the hook, that snelled hook, from popping out so quickly. You can pitch into the heaviest of stuff. You know, it's a lot of boom, bang, bang when you're using these heavy weights, like a 1.5 and a 2, and that hook gets jostled around, and when you're using thinner baits, that hook can pop out pretty easy. But with that thicker body, you still got to hit them hard under the mats, and you got to hit them hard when they bite, but it allows you to be more efficient and pitch, and you don't have to worry about that snell popping out. But why not? Definitely a go-to. All right, classic, old school, catches giants. Crawdaddy, Gambler Crawdaddy. My buddy Donnie Bass put me onto this. It is slender, kind of like the BB cricket, but a little bit bigger presentation, a little bit longer. Now, you will have the snell pop out of it quite a bit. It's almost like a I guess a BB cricket senior, if you will. It's got a longer profile, but you still have that do nothing sort of, I mean, it's gonna vibrate a little and kick with those craws, but it's real simple, real streamlined, gets you through some mats. Like you can pick up like a 1.5 and put a wine on it, not get through. Pick up a crawdaddy and you'll get through, and that's that slender sort of profile. It slides through a little bit easier, but like I said, the hook pops out on it, but it does pick up some big bites. Definitely a go-to. Lastly but not leastly, actually I think we're gonna do one more after this, but the Mega Daddy. The Mega Daddy is the ultimate jig trailer, the ultimate emergent, like cane round reed pad pitcher. When I'm pitching this punch skirt setup, or if I'm pitching a jig, this is what I'll pick up to put on the back. These big kickers, like we were talking about, with just shaking it a little bit and they move and that skirt moves when the fish are on the bed, is killer. You get giant bites. It really seems to aggravate them, and that ribbed body paired up with those kicking claws that have a little bit of a ridge on them, dude, they move just enough to really aggravate that fish and close the deal, especially with bedding fish and fish focusing on brim. Because what this really looks like is a brim sort of kicking around like that when it's going down, and especially on that jig or on that punch skirt, it has that profile of that bigger brim swimming around the bed, swimming around the cane, getting in their face and pissing them off enough to go, ooh. So Mega Daddy, especially in that emergent stuff. Won't use it so much on the mats. Lastly, this is an oldie but a goodie. My buddy at D&M Custom Baits gave me a bunch of these, and I still have my stockpile. This is called the Big Mama. It's ridged, it's got this giant paddle, great for pitching mats. It's your beaver style bait. I use it almost 100% on mats. I don't really pitch it to like open emergent cover like the cane and that, but it's got that lovely ridge body. These kicker legs kind of give it a little bit more wonka as it's going down. Once again, you're imitating a brim. What's great with it too is as you're pumping it under that mat, those legs will kick kind of like a burner craw, but it has a little different flutter to it. And you know, when you're pulsing, a lot of times to catch these fish, especially now that everybody knows, you know, punching, loves to do it, it's an intense bite, you really have to work those fish out of the mats, and that requires pumping the bait, sort of drawing them in. It's almost like dragging a worm, but under a mat, and you're just triggering them to bite. But Big Mama, mat deal. Let's move on to talking about what we're actually gonna pitch these to and punch on through. All right, as I mentioned, we have our emergent cover stuff and then we have our mat stuff. Let's talk emergent cover real quick, and we kind of hit on it, so I'm not gonna get too like deep into it, but when you're using that punch skirt setup, such as this deal, or you're pitching that jig, you're looking for pads, emergent pads. You wanna get it right in that crown. Round reed clumps, isolated, just clumps of round reeds. Those fish will bed on there. They'll use them as a staging area to move in. Cane clumps. And here's a little secret that not too many people know. Everybody wants to pitch, like you see all these pads behind me, for instance. Like they're like, oh, awesome, a bunch of pads. And they'll go and they'll try to hit everything. The trick with that cane is you want to look for one strand, just like my finger sticking up, one little strand, because what you'll end up finding, especially when you have bedding fish, is those bedding fish will use that one isolated strand to lay their eggs on and to bed out on, and it's the least likely target you'd ever imagine. Sometimes it's annoying to hit because you got to troll over there, you got to hit a little isolated piece, go out of your way, out of your your trail that you're making along the line, but definitely worth it because those fish will use those isolated pieces of emergent cover to go ahead and spawn. Mats. I could talk for hours about mats because I love all mats in all shapes and sizes, all shapes and forms. Mats are so fun because they're so divergent. There's so many different kinds of mats. There's junk mats, there's floating mats, there's Hydrilla mats, there's wood mats, there's so much stuff. But let's talk generally. Really, there's your floating mats. Hyacinth, pennywort. What else you got? Pennywort, hyacinth. There's some weird like pondy stuff too, but really those, oh, water lettuce. Can't forget about water lettuce. Water lettuce, pennywort, hyacinth. Those are gonna be your floating mats. Basically, they don't have any roots connecting them to the bottom. They're floating. They're great for oxygen. They're great pre-spawn and staging areas for bass moving in. You'll often find them blown along something too. They'll be blown along the cattails. They'll be blown along the rowan weeds. And basically those fish will use those areas to move. They'll move into them. They'll hang out under those mats. We get some cold weather, good to go. And then they'll move out to spawn. But you wanna look for corners, points, all your traditional things. And once again, big word, and you're gonna hear it some more as we move through the mat subject, is isolated, isolated, isolated. Might not get big, let me reframe that. Might not get a bunch of bites fishing isolated stuff, but you're gonna get the big bites. So what other kind of mats are there? Another kind of mats that I absolutely love are Hydrilla mats. Hydrilla mats, unlike floating mats, they're stuck to the bottom. But what happens with a Hydrilla mat is that mat canopies, that Hydrilla grows so big, it's like, dude, I need a haircut. Kind of like me, which I got, but I need a haircut, but it doesn't get a haircut. And all those strands start rolling over each other and they make a little house. They make a canopy. It's what we call the bass house. And those fish will get in that canopy. And the way you can tell that apart from just flipping Hydrilla is when you pitch in, first of all, you'll see it topped off. You'll see it kind of rolled over itself. It's hard to explain, but when you see it, you'll know it. And when you pitch in and your bait goes through, there'll be an initial kind of like, I can't get through. And then it'll go and fall straight to the bottom. And that's when you know you're on good Hydrilla too. It's a great litmus test for that. If you're pitching and you're like trying to pump the bait and you think you're in a canopy and you're getting hung up or you feel strands hitting the bait as you pump, not good Hydrilla. You want the canopied stuff. You want stuff that's basically killed itself. It kills itself under that mat because it can't get any sunlight, and you have this open dome of house bass. Wonderful, good stuff. But you're looking for that open dome. Once again, fish will use these for staging. I found too, this is a great sort of pre-summer pattern as well, especially as you get further north in Florida. That Hydrilla really holds oxygen, creates oxygen, has great shade, bunch of bait, bunch of forage in there. It's an excellent area to follow too, I guess you could say. Hydrilla lines will grow up on deep edges, so you can flip in the real shallow stuff for those spawning fish. You can get out a little bit deeper for those fish that are moving out, that are post spawn, and you have a great situation anywhere in between. Lots of bait, lots of cover, and some big fish. What's really cool with the Hydrilla too is oftentimes you don't need as much weight. You can use that 1.5, but I've gone down as far as 1 ounce or even 1.25 to get on through. Slides through super clean, a lot easier to get through than some of the other mats that we're talking about. So the last mat we're gonna hit on is, I think I've won, I don't really fish tournaments that much anymore. I've really turned to focusing on the video and doing that. I should fish some stuff, it'd be kind of fun, but my winnings, and granted, dude, I'm nobody, like I can't, I don't fish the tour or anything like that, but the stuff that I've actually done really well at, I got a couple second places on the BFL, I got like a 3rd place from years back, but the times that I've really done good have been all about junk mats. So what's a junk mat? A junk mat is junk that floats, that blows into something, or just floats around and it's stuck somewhere. And there's no roots attaching it. Usually it's dead or dying, and it's gunky, junky. But here's the trick, especially in early season when you're dealing with cold weather, that junk mat is basically breaking down. So as it breaks down, it creates heat because it's a natural process. And so they hold a little bit of extra heat. They'll hold more of that sunlight, and as they break down, they'll actually create heat for themselves, which make it a perfect matinate for fish during cold fronts, during real tough fishing, to go and get some heat, stay comfortable, stay warm, keep the eggs good to go. But junk mats, I mean, they can be anything. I'm talking like chopped up cane that's floating around that got blown into a little corner and caught on some other cane. Some of the best mats that I've ever found have been eelgrass that's all chopped up, looks gunky, looks like crap you can walk on, the birds are walking on it, yet there's a gap of water like that under it, and you can punch in through, get on through, and freaking once again, it's much like Hydrilla, where you're gonna know if you're on the good stuff. If you pitch in, your bait gets through, and it's like goes straight to the bottom. That's the big trick. That's how you know you're on a good junk mat. The other thing too is, like we've talked about with other types of mats, other types of punching cover, is you want isolated, isolated, isolated. And that's really the key for bigger fish when it comes down to it. Finally, one thing that really spans across all this fishing is you want to think small picture, you want to think big picture. What am I talking about? Well, big picture, you know, where are the fish going to spawn? Where are they going to end up? Like, what's their destination? What's their end game? Where's the flat that they're going to do their business on? And then you kind of zoom out and you're like, how are they going to get there? And that's where the mats come into play, because the mats especially, and even, you know, the cane and the round reeds, these are areas that these fish stop at. The cane and the round reeds, they'll spawn on sometimes. They'll actually get on, stage on, and then they'll spawn right in the same place. But oftentimes with the mats are sort of alleyways or venting ways, highways to the spawning flats. So you want to step back and look and be like, hey, if I was a fish, I want to end up at X. How do I get there? You know, what's the line to get there? Where's the mats? Where's that isolated cover, that stuff that I can punch to get there? And one little trick, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, it's something I found out, had to be like 4 years ago in Okeechobee. Sometimes the fish will go in to come out. What that means is, say you got like an awesome set of freaking mats, way in super shallow, like I'm talking like a foot of water all the way in the back of like the grass line way in. Sometimes what those fish will do is they'll come in off the main lake, they'll go all the way into that super thick cover. Once the conditions get right, once those fronts go through, you get some sunny weather, you get a full moon, those fish will actually go out to deeper water to spawn. They'll come out from those mats and they'll spawn in that deeper water. So keep an eye on that. That's a little inside the beltway tip that I'll throw out there for you guys to chew on. But that's mats. I thought we needed to brush up because of the time of year, because this is the time of year that trophy catches, giants, magnums, freaking funkaholics come out of the mats, and it's one of my favorite times of year. So get out, pick yourself up a few rods. You're gonna need a few different setups in order to be efficient, in order to cover everything you need to cover. But Emergent cover, focus on it with like a 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce, either a jig or a punch skirt setup, and then have that 1.5 and that 2 ounce ready to go. You might need to mix it up a little from time to time, but in general, those two weights are gonna get you through everything you need to get through, and they're gonna hook you up with a little braid scream. So tight lines, guys, subscribe, like it, tell your boys about it. Like I always say, this is real fishing, and I'm throwing out there what I know. I don't know everything, but I'm gonna give it to you straight up. I don't BS around. So tight lines, guys, make sure you subscribe, and show me some of your punching fish if you want. Peace out.